The bouquet of red roses in my hands trembled as I fought to steady my grip. A dozen cameras pointed our way, the eyes of 100 guests pressing on me with expectation. I could hardly breathe. Beneath the heavy lace of my wedding gown, my heart thundered so loudly I was sure it would give me away. This is wrong. The thought pulsed with each heartbeat. The man beside me, my soon-to-be husband, kept a vice grip on my fingers. I felt the bite of his nails even through my lace glove. To love and to cherish, until death do you part, the officiant prompted, his voice echoing in the grand hall. The gilded arches and ornate chandeliers of the Langston Grand Hotel's ballroom seemed to tilt around me. I swayed, my vision blurring at the edges. This was my moment to speak, to seal my fate. My mouth was paper dry. I looked up at Richard, Rick as everyone called him, towering over me in his tailored suit. His jaw was tight, a muscle feathering under bronze skin. From a distance, any stranger might think he was a nervous groom, anxiously awaiting my answer. But I knew the truth. I knew that subtle tick and what it meant. It meant, don't you dare make a scene. My gaze drifted past him to the rows of guests. My father sat in the front, his face a stern mask of pride and warning. I was the dutiful daughter fulfilling the arrangement he had brokered. The business merger disguised as a marriage. At the end of the aisle, I could see 2 of Rick's security detail standing guard. Even now, they watched my every move. The air was stifling with the scent of roses and expensive perfume. I felt a trickle of sweat slide down between my shoulder blades. I opened my mouth, but no words came. The officiant's expectant smile faltered. Rick's fingers tightened painfully around mine, dragging my attention back to his face. His blue eyes bored into me, the threat behind them crystal clear. Say it. My voice cracked. Heat prickled behind my eyes, threatening tears. I tried to summon the obedient words that would condemn me to a life I already knew would destroy me. My gaze fell to the delicate bouquet I held. The red rose petals had started to bruise brown at the edges from being held too long, just like me, wilting under pressure. In that instant, I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't speak the lie. My silence stretched, and a ripple of murmurs flowed through the crowd. Panic surged, mingling with a wild, desperate resolve. Run! I'm sorry, I whispered, barely more than a breath, then louder, with a strength I didn't know I had. I can't do this. Gasps erupted. Rick's eyes went wide with shock and fury. Don't you dare! He hissed under his breath, but I was already yanking my hands free. The engagement ring he'd placed there only a month ago snagged on the lace of my glove. I ripped the glove off entirely, the ring clattering to the marble floor between us. For a fraction of a second, time stopped. No one moved or spoke. My heart slammed against my ribs. Then I turned and ran. My satin heels slipped on the polished aisle runner as I bolted past rows of stunned guests. My veil snagged on something, maybe a chair, tearing free from my hair. I left it behind without a second glance. Someone shouted my name. My mother, a friend, it all blurred into a cacophony of exclamations. I hit the double doors of the ballroom with both palms, and they burst open to blessed, cool air. Stop her! Rick's roar came from behind me. I flew across the ornate lobby, nearly knocking over a pedestal of white lilies. Guests from another event gawked as I sprinted past, my skirts gathered in shaking fists. My lungs burned, but I didn't slow down. Keep going. Just go. A flash of black fabric and a strong arm lunging from my right, one of Rick's guards, nearly caught me. I ducked under his grasp with a desperate cry, adrenaline lending me speed I never knew I possessed. His fingers snatched only a trailing ribbon from my half-fallen updo. Ahead, the revolving doors to the street glinted in the sunlight. Freedom. I barreled through, the door spinning too slowly for my frantic pace. The moment I spilled out onto the front steps of the hotel, cool autumn air slapped my cheeks. Valets and doormen in crisp uniforms looked up in alarm as I stumbled into the circular driveway where cars idled. A few sleek sedans and limousines lined the curb, waiting for wedding guests or hotel patrons. I scanned desperately for help, but everyone seemed frozen in shock at the sight of a bride bolting from her own wedding. Behind me, I heard the heavy thud of the hotel doors again. Rick's men were in pursuit. Panic squeezed my chest. I kicked off my pinching heels and ran barefoot across the concrete. A silver town car sat at the end of the drive, engine running while the driver loaded luggage at the trunk. Without hesitating, I yanked the rear door open and threw myself inside. "Hey!" the driver shouted, startled. I scrambled across the back seat, satin and tulle filling the space like a cloud. The interior smelled of leather and lemon polish. There was no time to think. Over the driver's cursing, I lunged forward and slammed my palm on the door lock. Then I clambered over the console into the front seat, heart hammering so violently it hurt. The keys were in the ignition. Thank God. I shoved the gear into drive just as a fist pounded on the window beside me. One of the guards had caught up, his face pressed to the glass, teeth bared in a snarl. I shrieked and stomped the gas pedal. The car lurched forward. The guard jumped back, shouting something I couldn't hear over the blood rushing in my ears. Tires squealed against the pavement as I careened away from the hotel entrance. In the rearview mirror, I saw two suited figures scramble to a black SUV, Rick's men, giving chase. My stomach hollowed out with terror. I wove through the midday city traffic, horns blaring as I cut off cars. I had no destination, only the urge to get as far from that hotel and Rick as possible. The veil was gone, my carefully pinned curls tumbling around my shoulders. I caught a glimpse of myself in the rear view, wide brown eyes rimmed with streaked mascara, face pale under the bridal makeup, looking every bit a madwoman on the run. A sob bubbled in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Focus. I had to focus, or I'd crash before I ever got away. Already, I could see in the distance the black SUV forcing its way through traffic behind me. Closer, closer. They were gaining. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles bleached white. If they caught me, I couldn't even finish the thought. Rick's enraged face seared itself in my mind. I pressed the gas harder, weaving around a delivery truck. The hotel's plush driveway gave way to city streets lined with glinting skyscrapers. Pedestrians on crosswalks paused to stare as I blew past. Up ahead, a traffic light turned red. I couldn't stop. If I did, I was done. With a silent prayer and a surge of reckless determination, I spun the wheel and took a sudden right down a narrower side street. The car fishtailed, tires screeching. I nearly hit a parked car, correcting at the last second with a cry of alarm. My breath was ragged, chest heaving against the tight corset of my dress. There was an ache building in my side, a cramp from fear and exertion, but I refused to slow. The SUV was still behind me, relentless. Another turn, then another. I had no plan, only the primal drive to escape. Each glance in the mirror showed that dark vehicle closer than before, like a shark closing in. A glint of metal in the corner of my vision. Too late. The black shape of a car appeared from a cross street to my left, mere yards ahead. I slammed both feet on the brake and swerved hard, a scream tearing from my lungs. Metal slammed into metal with an ear-splitting crunch. The world spun. My shoulder wrenched against the seatbelt as the car skidded to a halt. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. White powder, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Airbags? My head swam. I forced my eyes open. The town car's front end had crumpled into the side of another vehicle. A sleek black sedan that now sat at an awkward angle in the intersection. Oh God. I'd hit someone. Pain stung along my collarbone where the seatbelt dug in, but nothing felt broken. With trembling fingers, I pushed the deflated airbag aside. Through the spider-webbed cracks of the windshield, I saw the other car's driver door open. A tall figure stepped out, silhouetted against the midday sun. Panic flared anew. I had to move. Rick's men were still behind me. Dazed, I clawed at the door handle and stumbled out onto the asphalt on unsteady legs. The hem of my gown caught on the pedal, causing me to sprawl onto my hands and knees on the rough pavement. My palms stung, bits of gravel embedding in the skin. A shadow fell over me. I looked up, heart in my throat. The man from the other car loomed above, blocking the light. He was... devastating was the first word that came to mind. Tall and broad-shouldered in a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin, he radiated an aura of tightly leashed power. His hair was thick and dark, swept back from a strong, angular face. For one absurd second, I thought he looked like vengeance come to life. Then I saw his eyes, ice blue, piercing, and fixed on me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. He was saying something, his voice deep and low, but the blood rushing in my ears drowned it out. I scrambled backward on the pavement, a whimper escaping before I could choke it down. Between the crash and my pursuers, I was one frayed nerve away from collapse. The man crouched, hands spread in a gesture of placation. Easy, I caught that word, rounded by a faint accent I couldn't place. Russian? Italian? My brain was too muddled to tell. Are you hurt? Before I could answer, an aggressive shout cut through the air. Step away from her. I twisted toward the voice. The black SUV had screeched to a stop a short distance away. Two men, Rick's men, were advancing, guns drawn. My stomach turned to ice, a blur of motion. Suddenly, the dark-haired stranger was in front of me, rising to his full imposing height. He shifted his stance, half shielding me behind his broad frame. Everything about him went still and lethal. "This doesn't concern you," one of Rick's guards snapped. He was a brute of a man, thick neck bulging out of his suit collar. He kept his pistol trained shakily between us. Behind him, the second man circled warily, trying to get to me. "Hand over the girl and we won't have trouble." The stranger's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Put the guns down." A command, not a request. The guard who'd spoken sneered. "Listen, whoever you are, that's Richard Caldwell's bride. She ran out on their wedding. We're under orders to bring her back." At Rick's name, a sliver of recognition flashed in the stranger's eyes. His jaw tightened. "The lady doesn't seem inclined to go with you." He slid a step to his left, keeping me behind him. I peeked around his arm, trembling. "That's none of your business," the second man growled. "Move, now." Everything happened in a blink. The stranger lunged forward and an object glinted in his hand, a gun of his own, appearing as if from thin air. A thunderous crack split the air. I flinched, a scream catching in my throat. One of the guards cried out, his weapon clattering to the ground as he stumbled back clutching his hand. The stranger had shot the gun right out of his grasp with merciless precision. The second guard reacted, raising his pistol, but the stranger's aim swung to him next. "No!" I shouted, fearing a bloodbath. Miraculously, the man listened. He didn't fire again. He didn't need to. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. The crash had attracted unwanted attention. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the uninjured guard grabbed his partner's good arm. I saw fear in their faces now, eyes darting between the approaching sirens and the stranger who had single-handedly disarmed them. "This isn't over," the one with the injured hand spat, voice tight with pain, but they were retreating, shuffling back to their SUV. I sagged in relief as the vehicle peeled away with a screech, leaving black skid marks behind. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of steam from the wrecked engines. The stranger turned to me slowly. I shrank back reflexively, still on the ground where I'd fallen. My pulse was a wild drumbeat in my ears. He'd just taken on 2 armed men without flinching. Who was this man? He extended a hand down toward me. In the distance, I could see the flashing lights of police cruisers rounding the corner. Panic seized me anew. If the police took me back, they'd hand me straight to Rick and my father. My throat closed up. "I have to go," I gasped, struggling to my feet without accepting his hand. Every part of me hurt, but I stumbled forward, trying to tug free from layers of torn satin tangling my legs. "Please, I can't go back." The stranger caught me by the arms before I face-planted on the asphalt. His grip was firm, large hands circling my upper arms with surprising care. "Easy," he said again, those intense blue eyes locking onto mine. Up close, his face was all hard angles and arresting contrasts, breathtaking and terrifying at once. "Let me go," I pleaded, though I made no move to actually escape his hold. My voice broke on a sob. The sirens were nearly upon us. "They'll take me back. I can't go back." He studied me, a frown drawing his dark brows together. For a heartbeat, I feared he might drag me to the police himself. I had just wrecked his car, after all. But instead, he gave a curt nod. "My car can still move. Get in," he ordered, already steering me firmly toward the black sedan. The vehicle's front fender was crushed, but the engine was apparently still running, purring unevenly. He opened the passenger door and practically lifted me into the seat. I trembled, uncertain if escaping with this stranger was truly wiser than being in police hands. But the memory of Rick's livid face spurred me on. This stranger had stood between me and those men. For now, he was my only ally. He slid into the driver's side. The car protested with a metallic groan as he hit the accelerator, but it pulled away from the intersection just as 2 police cruisers swerved onto the scene behind us. We sped down the next block, leaving chaos in our wake. The stranger drove with one hand on the wheel, the other pressed to a button on the car's console. "Enzo, ho bisogno di te," he spoke sharply in Italian into what I realized was a built-in speaker. His voice was a taut leash on barely restrained anger. "Incidente stradale. Sto arrivando al garage. Preparati. My Italian was rusty, but I caught a few words. Accident, garage, be ready. He must have been calling for help. I shrank into the leather seat, fighting the urge to curl into a ball. My entire body was trembling uncontrollably now that the adrenaline crash set in. The stranger, no, my rescuer, I supposed, glanced over at me. His gaze flicked down to where I gripped the seatbelt across my chest like a lifeline. Slowly, he shrugged off his suit jacket with one arm and held it out to me. Here, he said, not unkindly. I hesitated. Then I realized I was shivering, though the car was warm. Shock. I accepted the jacket and draped it around my shoulders. It smelled of him, clean and subtle, like oak moss and something rich and smoky. The jacket's weight was comforting, its lining still carrying his body heat. Thank you, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure if I was thanking him for the jacket, for intervening back there, or for not handing me over to the police. All of it, maybe. His eyes softened just a fraction. In the daylight, they were a clearer blue than I'd realized, framed by thick black lashes. You're welcome. He trailed off pointedly. Elena? I supplied. My throat felt raw from the combination of fear and nearly crying. Elena Davenport. Elena, he repeated. My name sounded different on his tongue, given a gentle emphasis. I'm Dante. Just Dante. He offered no last name. I nodded, clutching the open front of his jacket with both hands. The events of the last hour were crashing into me all at once. I was sitting in a stranger's car, Dante's car, having fled my own wedding. Rick would be livid. My father. Oh God, my father would likely disown me for this very public humiliation. A hysterical laugh bubbled up before I could stop it. Dante's brow creased. Shock, he said, almost to himself. The car took a sharp turn and began descending into a ramp. I realized we were entering an underground garage. He eased the damaged sedan into a secluded corner near a concrete pillar, just as a pair of figures jogged toward us. Two men, both in dark attire, approached. One was stocky and bald, the other lean and armed with a rifle slung across his chest. My heart lurched, but they moved with disciplined purpose. Dante killed the engine and stepped out to speak with them. Through the window, I heard snippets in Italian again, his tone curt as he issued orders. The bald man, Enzo, nodded and hurried off, phone already at his ear. The other stood watch, eyes alert, as if expecting we'd been followed. Dante opened my door. Without thinking, I shrank back, clutching his jacket tighter. He extended a hand, patience tempering the steel in his gaze. It's all right. These are my men. I wasn't sure all right applied to anything anymore, but I allowed him to help me out of the low car. My legs were weak, wobbling as I tried to stand. Dante's hand settled at my waist to steady me. Heat flared in my cheeks at the contact, and I immediately felt silly. Blushing now, after everything that had happened? But my body seemed determined to react to him on a level beyond my control. He noticed. The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a reassuring smile. If I hadn't seen him shoot a man's gun out of his hand minutes ago, I might almost have thought him simply a concerned gentleman. Almost. This way, he said, guiding me toward a second car parked nearby. A charcoal gray SUV with blacked-out windows. The armed man opened the back passenger door without a word. I balked, sudden fear jolting through me. Climbing into another stranger's vehicle felt like a step too far, even if I owed Dante my life at this point, and my feet rooted to the concrete. Dante paused, turning back to face me. I promise. You're safe with me, he said quietly. We're going somewhere secure. I have a doctor on call who can make sure you're not badly hurt. His gaze flickered over me, and only then did I realize how disheveled I must look. My wedding dress torn and stained, arms scraped, bits of glass glittering in my hair from the crash. My apartment isn't far, I blurted, a last grasp at independence. I could just— They'll expect you there, he interrupted, gentle but firm. Caldwell's people, or your father, is that where you want to go? I swallowed hard. The image of Rick's furious face filled my mind. My father's disappointment would be even worse, maybe not violent like Rick, but crushing in its weight. Dante was right. I couldn't go home. Not yet. Maybe not ever. My eyes burned with tears I refused to shed. Wordlessly, I climbed into the SUV. Dante settled in beside me, not the front passenger seat as I might have expected, but in the back, next to me. Perhaps he thought I needed someone to physically hold me in case I tried to fling myself out of the moving car. The absurdity of that thought almost made me smile. I wasn't going anywhere now. Where else could I go? As the SUV smoothly pulled out of the garage, Dante spoke quietly to the driver in Italian before addressing me again. Elena, I need you to tell me what happened back there. The truth. I stiffened, fingers twisting in the fabric of the jacket around me. He had saved me, yes, but did that give him a right to my life story? On the other hand, what choice did I have? My gratitude towards this man was tangled up with wariness. He clearly wasn't just some good Samaritan who happened to be passing by. The way those thugs had backed off, the way his men jumped to obey, they knew him as someone to be feared or respected, possibly both. "You know part of it already," I said quietly, staring at my bare toes where they pressed into the plush floor mat. Bits of grime from the street marred the ivory silk of my skirt. The sight brought a small, bitter laugh to my lips. I was Richard Caldwell's would-be bride. "I gathered that much," Dante said. I could feel his eyes on me, sharp as a blade. "Why were you running?" A dozen answers jostled in my mouth. Because I was being forced to marry a monster. Because my father cared more about his company's merger than my happiness. Because I was too afraid to call it off until it was literally life or death. Because Rick had threatened me. I chose a simpler explanation. "Cold feet," I said, the joke falling flat in the tense quiet of the car. I rubbed my arms, suddenly cold despite the jacket. I couldn't go through with it. Not when my voice caught. Dante said nothing, letting the silence draw out until I felt it demand the truth. I closed my eyes. Not when I knew what kind of man I was about to tie myself to. Rick. He isn't a good person. He can be charming when he wants, but I'd started to see flashes of his real temper in the past few weeks. Little things at first. Yelling at staff, isolating me from friends. My fingers found a tender spot on my left wrist, where faint bruises still lingered from when Rick had grabbed me days ago during an argument. I hadn't thought Dante could notice in the dim interior of the SUV, but his gaze followed the motion, and his expression darkened. "He hurt you." It wasn't a question. There was a lethal edge beneath those 3 words that sent a shiver down my spine, but I realized, with some surprise, that anger wasn't directed at me. I swallowed. He never, not anything I couldn't handle. Even to my own ears, it sounded like a weak defense. But I knew it would get worse after the wedding. And my father. I shook my head. "It doesn't matter. I just knew I had to get out." "You did." Dante's voice was low. "That was brave." I huffed a breath, not quite a laugh. It was desperate. Sometimes those are the same thing. I turned to look at him then. He lounged back slightly in the seat, one arm on the center console, but his posture didn't hide the coiled tension in his body. In the passing streetlights of the city, his profile looked forbidding, a man accustomed to command. Yet he had removed his jacket to comfort me, and he spoke now with a gentleness that felt at odds with everything I'd witnessed of him so far. "Why are you helping me?" I asked softly. It had been nagging at me from the moment he intervened. "You don't even know me." His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something warmer in them, something almost like understanding. "Let's say I have little tolerance for men who treat women like property." His jaw tightened briefly. "And I happened to be there. Right time, right place. Right time, right place." I thought of the ruined cars, the fact that it was his car I'd slammed into. The cynic in me couldn't help but note it felt like fate, for whatever that was worth. I shivered again, and Dante's expression softened. "We'll be at my home shortly," he said. "You can rest, get cleaned up. You're safe there." Safe. I hadn't felt safe in a very long time. A knot I hadn't realized was hardened inside my chest loosened slightly. I nodded, pulling his jacket closer around me. My fingers brushed something in one pocket, a small rectangular shape. Before I could stop myself, I drew it out. A sleek black wallet. I flushed. "Oh, I'm sorry, I moved to put it back, embarrassed at snooping. But in that split second, I saw the ID visible through the wallet's clear window. Dante's full name printed below a serious, unsmiling photo. Dante Antonini. My stomach flipped as recognition set in. I knew that name. Anyone who read the news in our city would. Dante Antonini, reclusive investor, philanthropist. And if the rumors were to be believed, one of the most powerful figures in the underworld. A man whispered about in back rooms and fearful murmurs. A man my father had once warned me to stay far away from. My hands went cold. Dante gently plucked the wallet from my fingers and slid it back into his jacket pocket. He was watching me carefully. I realized my reaction must have shown on my face. You're, I stammered. Mafia. He's Mafia. The word hung unspoken between us. My heart kicked into a gallop. I shrank a little against the car door without meaning to, my tired mind reeling. I had traded one danger for another. Dante's eyes hardened, a flash of something like regret crossing his face. He looked away, jaw clenching. "We're here," he said quietly as the SUV rolled to a smooth stop. I hadn't even noticed we'd pulled into a private drive and up to the entrance of a towering high-rise. The building was all sleek glass and steel, looming into the night sky. One of the men from earlier, Enzo, opened my door. He respectfully kept his eyes averted from my disarray. Dante exited on the other side and came around to offer me a hand. I was suddenly hyper-aware that I was about to walk into a Mafia boss's home, wearing a tattered wedding dress, barefoot and vulnerable. Fear warred with an odd sense of reassurance. Dante hadn't harmed me. In fact, he'd shown me more kindness in an hour than Rick did in a year. I placed my hand in his, allowing him to help me out. Under the awning, the lobby doors opened, and a man in a concierge uniform greeted Dante with a deferential nod. We swept through the marble-floored lobby so quickly, I barely had time to register the opulence before we were in a private elevator, rising swiftly. My stomach swooped from the height and the weight of what I'd just discovered. I was alone with a Mafia boss, and he had no intention of letting me go. The elevator doors opened directly into Dante's penthouse. I stepped out behind him, feet sinking into a plush cream carpet. The space was breathtaking, an open floor plan with floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the city skyline ablaze with lights. Sleek, modern furniture in shades of charcoal and ivory filled the living area. A crystal chandelier hung above a marble dining table to the right, and ahead, sunken steps led down to a lounge where a grand piano stood gleaming by the windows. It was the home of a man with expensive taste and an eye for art. Paintings adorned the walls, and a sculpture of twisting black metal caught my eye from one corner. Under any other circumstances, I might have been awed, but now I swayed on my feet, exhaustion and adrenaline leaving me lightheaded. Dante noticed and gently touched my elbow. "Sit," he urged, guiding me to a long leather sofa. I sank into the cool leather gratefully. My dress crinkled around me in a messy cloud of tulle. I felt like a broken doll deposited in a pristine display case. Dante spoke quietly into a phone retrieved from his pocket, this time in English. "Bring up a med kit and ask Mara to send up some clothes for a woman. Small sizes." He paused, listening, then added, "And tell Dr. Chen to stand by." I opened my mouth to protest. I didn't need a doctor for a few scrapes, but Dante had already ended the call. He approached with a glass of water from a bar cart and handed it to me. My fingers were unsteady, sloshing the water until I took a careful sip. "Thank you," I murmured. My voice was starting to come back, though it sounded thin to my ears. He nodded, hovering a moment as if uncertain what to do with me now that I was safely here. In the bright light of the penthouse, I could see the full extent of the damage on my appearance. My once white gown was gray with grime in places, one sleeve dangling by a few threads where it had torn. Blood smeared my knees and forearms from my falls. My hair, once in an elegant chignon, now hung in a tangled, half-fallen braid with bits of debris clinging to it. I was a wreck, sitting in the lap of luxury. "I must look awful," I said with a weak attempt at a smile. Dante's expression remained serious. "You look like someone who's had a very difficult day." His tone was matter-of-fact without judgment. He crouched down in front of me, and before I realized it, he was carefully picking a tiny shard of glass out of the fabric by my ankle. I flinched, more from surprise than pain. He stilled. "May I?" he asked, glancing up at me for permission. Wordlessly, I nodded, with a gentleness I didn't expect. Dante lifted the hem of my dress enough to free my bare foot. I sucked in a breath as he plucked another glittering shard from a scrape on my shin, then another. His touch was efficient, yet cautious. My skin tingled where his fingers brushed. After a moment, he stood. "Wait here. I'll be right back," he said. He disappeared down a hallway and returned moments later with a first aid kit just as the elevator doors slid open again. A woman in a pressed suit, a housekeeper or assistant perhaps, stepped out carrying folded clothes, followed by the burly Enzo from the garage. The woman offered the stack to Dante. "Will these do, sir?" she asked politely, darting a curious glance at me. I flushed, suddenly self-conscious. Dante took the clothes. "Thank you, Lydia. That's fine." He nodded to Enzo, who set a white box, the med kit presumably, on the coffee table. "Stay by the elevator," Dante told him. Enzo inclined his head and moved back towards the lift, giving us space but ready at a moment's notice. Lydia left with a last look of mild concern in my direction. When we were alone again, Dante set the clothes, a pair of black leggings and a soft-looking blue cashmere sweater, beside me. "They might be a bit big on you, but they'll be more comfortable than the dress," he said. Tears unexpectedly pricked my eyes at the simple kindness of clean clothes. I blinked them back rapidly. "Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't." My voice caught, memories of the day's terror washing over me. I looked down, embarrassed by the tears that slipped down my cheeks despite my efforts. In my periphery, I saw Dante slowly sit on the coffee table directly in front of me, close enough that his knees nearly touched mine. He reached out as if to touch my shoulder, then seemed to reconsider and instead opened the first aid kit. "You don't need to thank me," he said quietly. "I'm just glad I was there." He retrieved an antiseptic wipe and gently took my hand. My knuckles were scraped raw, and I hadn't even noticed. "This might sting," he warned softly, then dabbed at the abrasion. It did sting, but I bit my lip and remained still as he cleaned the dirt from my various small wounds. His face was inches from mine as he worked, an enticing mix of strength and careful control. I found myself studying the curve of his dark lashes against his cheek, the subtle lines at the corner of his eyes that hinted he was perhaps mid-30s. A faint scar cut through one of his eyebrows, a thin white line that only added to his air of dangerous elegance. "Why are you being so kind to me?" I whispered. The question slipped out before I could stop it. Dante paused, meeting my gaze. His eyes searched mine for a long moment. "Because you need kindness right now," he said simply, "and I can give it." My throat tightened. When was the last time anyone had spoken to me so gently? Certainly not in the past frantic weeks of wedding planning and pressure. Not even my father, who loved me in his stern, conditional way, had ever been this tender. It made me both hopeful and wary at once. He finished tending my hands and carefully brushed an antiseptic-soaked cotton over the scrapes on my knees. I drew in a sharp breath at the contact. It wasn't pain, but something else that made me flush. Dante cleared his throat and sat back, disposing of the used wipes. "That's the worst of it. The rest are just bruises and scratches that will heal on their own." As if on cue, I yawned. A sudden jaw-cracking yawn that mortified me. Dante actually smiled then, a brief curve of his lips that softened his austere beauty. "You should get some rest. You've been, though, an ordeal." I nodded, feeling a sudden wash of exhaustion so deep I could cry from it, but I also felt grimy and uncomfortable in the ruined gown. I plucked at the dirty tool. "I should probably change." "Of course." He stood and offered me a hand up from the couch. I managed on my own, clutching the borrowed clothes. The room swayed and dark spots needled at the edge of my vision. Dante steadied me with a hand at my elbow again. Heat rushed to my face. "Sorry, just a head rush." He didn't remove his hand until I was fully stable. "The guest room is this way," he said, gesturing down the hall. I followed him, each step making my legs heavier. My feet were filthy, leaving faint smudges on the pristine floor as we went. I cringed at the sight. "I'm getting your floor dirty," I mumbled. Everything felt surreal. Here I was worried about footprints when my entire life had exploded in the span of an afternoon. Probably shock making me latch onto trivial things. "I don't care about the floor," Dante said firmly. He opened a door and led me into a spacious bedroom suite. The lights came on automatically, illuminating a king-size bed with an upholstered headboard, a seating area by another wall of windows, and a door ajar that revealed a gleam of marble, an attached bathroom. "There's a shower stocked with whatever you need," he told me. "Take your time. I'll be right outside if you need anything." Our eyes met for a fleeting second, and I felt that odd little pull again low in my stomach. He was standing so near, his hand still lightly resting at my lower back from guiding me in. For a moment, I thought he might say something else, but instead, he simply gave a polite nod and stepped back, closing the door to give me privacy. Alone in the luxurious guest room, I released a shaky breath. I peeled off the ruined wedding dress with trembling fingers. Angry red welts marked my skin where the corset bones had dug in for hours. They felt like the physical imprint of the life I'd just escaped. I left the dress pooled on the floor and stepped into the bathroom. Under the hot cascade of the rainfall shower, I finally let myself cry. Silent tears mingled with city grit and blood and fear, washing down the drain. When I emerged, skin pink from scrubbing, I felt a modicum of strength return. I slipped on the clothes Dante provided. The leggings needed a firm tug to stay up, but the soft blue sweater was warm and comforting. It smelled faintly of clean cotton, probably laundered recently. I wondered who the original owner was. Perhaps one of his staff had run out to a boutique downstairs. However he'd procured them so quickly, I was grateful. I towel-dried my tangled hair as best I could. Without my brush or any products, it would have to dry on its own in loose waves. In the mirror, I looked like a different person than the bride who stood at the altar a few hours ago. My face was scrubbed free of makeup, eyes red from crying but determined. The sweater's sleeves fell past my fingertips. I rolled them up and squared my shoulders at my reflection. I was alive. I was free from that wedding, and I was in the safest place I could possibly be given the circumstances, under the protection of Dante Antonini. A dangerous place, whispered a caution in my mind. Perhaps the most dangerous place, if the stories about him held any truth. I recalled how I'd instinctively recoiled when I realized who he was. Now, after seeing his kindness, I felt almost ashamed of that reaction. He hadn't been anything but gentle with me. The ruthless man who had disarmed my pursuers was also the man who'd tended my wounds and given me his own jacket to ward off my chills. I stepped out of the bathroom, gathering my dirty wedding clothes in my arms out of habit. The bedroom door was open a crack, and through it I heard low voices in the living area beyond. "Insists she was abducted," a man was saying in a clipped tone. I froze, heart jolting. They were talking about me. Carefully, I crept closer to the door, holding my breath. Another voice responded, deep and calm. "Dante, Elena is here of her own free will. She's made that abundantly clear." "Look," the first man replied, "normally this would be a family matter, but her father is the one who filed the report. And with the scene at the crash site, this is messy, Dante." A pause. "Messy," Dante repeated, a razor-thin edge in his voice. "I wasn't aware the NYPD took such a keen interest in adult women's personal choices." There was a heavy exhale. "Cut the crap. We both know this isn't just any woman. William Davenport is pulling every string he has. He claims you coerced her somehow, maybe due to business rivalry with Caldwell." A sharp sound, like a hand slapping a surface, made me jump. Dante's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "Careful, detective. You know me. You know what lines not to cross with your insinuations." Silence hung for a beat. I realized I was trembling, clutching the bundle of my dress to my chest. They were police, here, in Dante's home. My father must have involved them, spinning lies about what happened. Finally, the detective's voice came, lower and more placating. "All I need is to see the girl, Dante. Confirm she's okay. Then I can cool the department's interest. Right now, officially or not, they're treating it like a kidnapping by you." He didn't say it, but I heard the implication. Kidnapping by a mobster. It sounded absurd, given I was the one who had begged Dante not to let me be taken back. My heart pounded. Dante was silent. Perhaps he was considering options. If the police really thought he'd kidnapped me, this could get ugly. I couldn't let him get in trouble for helping me. Decision made, I pushed the door open and stepped into the hall. Both men turned to look as I emerged. Dante stood by the sofa, arms folded, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. Across from him near the elevator was a man in a cheap gray suit with a weary face and a badge on his belt. Enzo hovered nearby, hand near a holster at his waist. The detective's eyes widened a fraction as I approached, and I realized the picture I made, dressed in borrowed clothes, hair damp, clutching a wedding dress. "Elena," Dante said quickly, taking a step toward me. A warning glinted in his eyes, as if telling me I didn't have to do this. But I did. I wasn't going to hide. I mustered every ounce of poise left in me and met the detective's gaze. "I'm Elena Davenport," I said steadily. "I hear you're looking for me." The detective cleared his throat. "Miss Davenport, your father is very worried. He reported that you were taken against your will from the Langston Hotel." His skeptical tone and the way his gaze flicked between Dante and me indicated he wasn't entirely buying that story now that he saw me. I shook my head. "I wasn't taken. I ran away." I glanced at Dante, whose face was carefully neutral. "Mr. Antonini helped me. He saved me, actually." The detective blinked. This clearly wasn't the statement he anticipated. "So you're saying you're here by choice? That you don't want to return home?" I swallowed, my throat suddenly tight. Home. I pictured my father's cold disappointment, Rick's furious humiliation. A tremor went through me, but I lifted my chin. "That's correct. I'm here by my own choice. I do not want to go back to my father or to Richard Caldwell." The detective ran a hand through his thinning hair, looking distinctly unhappy. "Miss, do you understand what kind of implications?" "I understand perfectly," I interrupted, my voice firm. "I'm 24 years old. No one can force me to marry or to stay somewhere I feel unsafe. Richard Caldwell and I are finished. I left him at the altar. Whatever my father might have told you, I am not kidnapped. In fact," I drew a shaky breath. "If anyone tried to force me back to that situation, then I'd consider it kidnapping." A flicker of respect passed through the detective's tired eyes. He nodded slowly. All right, Miss Davenport, that's pretty clear, he exhaled. I'll inform your father and the department that you're safe and staying voluntarily with Mr. Antonini. Dante uncrossed his arms. That's it then. There was a note of finality and subtle threat in his tone, like a velvet-wrapped iron bar. The detective held up his hands. I'll leave it at that. Off the record, I suggest maybe giving the family a call at some point. Let them know you're alive. It'll make things easier for everyone. He eyed Dante warily. No one in the department wants unnecessary trouble. I appreciate your concern, Detective, Dante replied evenly, walking to the elevator and pointedly hitting the call button. Taking the cue, the detective offered me a thin, polite smile. Glad you're okay. He stepped into the elevator, and Enzo closed the door behind him. The moment the elevator began its descent, the tension in the room dissipated like air from a balloon. I hadn't realized I was shaking until I felt Dante's warm hand cover mine, gently prying my fingers from the death grip I had on my crumpled wedding dress. I'd been clutching it this whole time like some absurd security blanket. My hands ached from the pressure. You didn't have to come out, Dante said softly. He took the ruined gown from me and set it aside on a chair, then guided me back toward the sofa. I sank down, suddenly drained. I could have handled him. I managed a faint smile. And risk getting charged with kidnapping me? No, I wasn't going to let you take the fall for my choices. I looked up at him earnestly. It's not your fight. It's mine. And I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere I don't choose to go. Something in his gaze warmed. Pride? Approval? It made my stomach do a small flip. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I think your father and Caldwell just got their answer loud and clear. I nodded, a mixture of relief and sadness swelling inside me. I had just drawn a line in the sand against my own family. There would be fallout from that. I knew my father well enough. He would likely never forgive this humiliation. My throat tightened, and I looked away, blinking back a fresh wave of tears. I barely knew which emotion I was even crying from anymore. Relief, regret, fear, gratitude, all of it, probably. Dante's hand stayed on mine, a warm, solid weight anchoring me. His voice was low. Elena, forgive me if this is too forward, but have you got anyone you trust? Friends? Other family? If you wanted to go to them, I could arrange. I squeezed his hand without thinking, panicking at the idea of leaving this safe harbor. No, I said quickly. No, I don't want to go anywhere else right now. I told you I don't have many people. My mother passed years ago. It's just my father, and I can't face him. Not after this. Not until I'm stronger. My breath hitched. Admitting that felt like a defeat, but it was true. I wasn't ready to confront the wreckage of my old life. Dante's thumb brushed lightly over the back of my hand, a soothing gesture. Okay. You can stay here, as long as you need. I looked at him through my tears. His face was so earnest, so determined. I wondered if he realized he was still holding my hand. If he did, he gave no sign of discomfort. For once, the closeness of a man didn't make me want to flinch away. It was the opposite. I found myself leaning toward him, drawn to the steady calm he exuded. He cleared his throat, seeming to become aware of our proximity. Gently, he released my hand and rose. I immediately missed the warmth. I'll give you some time to rest, he said. My home is yours for as long as you like. No one will bother you here. I swallowed the emotion clogging my throat. You've already done so much. I don't want to be a burden. His brows drew together sharply, and I was startled by the flash of anger in his eyes. Anger not at me, I sensed, but at the very idea. You are not a burden, Elena. He spoke my name with such fervor it sent heat through me. Please don't ever think of yourself that way. Caught off guard by the intensity of his response, I could only nod. Okay. He raked a hand through his dark hair, the tension easing from his face as quickly as it had come. I'll be in my office down the hall if you need anything at all. Enzo will be outside the door as well. You're completely safe here. Safe. There was that word again. For the first time in as long as I could recall, I believed it. Despite everything, maybe even because of everything, I felt safer with Dante than anywhere else in the world. Thank you, I murmured again, wishing I had stronger words. My exhaustion was returning full force, tugging at me to lie down. He gave a faint smile and inclined his head. Get some sleep, Elena. After he left, I curled up on the sofa rather than returning to the bedroom. The space felt too large and lonely without him nearby. Pulling a plush throw blanket around me, I let my heavy eyelids close. My last thought before sleep claimed me was a quiet, fervent hope that I hadn't just traded one gilded cage for another. Yet deep down, I already sensed the truth. Dante Antonini might be a dangerous man, but with him, I felt anything but trapped. With him, for the first time in years, I felt free. I slept for 13 straight hours. When I finally surfaced from the depths of dreamless exhaustion, it was late morning. Sunlight poured through the penthouse windows, painting warm rectangles on the hardwood floor. For a brief, blissful moment, I didn't remember why I was waking on an unfamiliar sofa wrapped in a cashmere throw. Then reality settled like a weight on my chest. I was safe, but I was also effectively a refugee from my own life. Pushing aside the blanket, I sat up. My muscles protested, bruises announcing themselves across my knees, shoulder, and ribs. Yesterday's events played in my mind, the runaway dash, the crash, Dante emerging like a dark knight, the showdown with Rick's men, and then the quiet moments where he'd tended to me, listened to me, defended me even against the police. He'd given me no reason to doubt him, yet a part of me still marveled at the situation. I rose and padded to the window, drawn by the view. From this height, the city looked almost peaceful. Tiny yellow cabs crawled along streets far below. Pedestrians were mere dots. I wondered if any of those people down there had heard the news, the society wedding that imploded in scandal. Perhaps by now my escape was tabloid fodder. Runaway heiress, or jilted groom headlines, with speculation rampant. The thought made me wince. I could only imagine my father's mortification. That part of my life felt distant already, like something that had happened to someone else. The discreet cough of someone clearing their throat made me jump. I spun to find a middle-aged woman in a crisp white blouse standing a respectful distance away near the hall entrance. She carried a tray from which the aroma of coffee drifted temptingly. "Good morning, miss," she said with a polite smile. "Mr. Antonini asked me to bring you breakfast. He's on a call in his office, but said to tell you he'll join you shortly." Heat crept to my cheeks. I hoped I didn't look too disheveled from sleep. "Thank you." I realized I didn't know her name. "Lydia," she supplied. The same woman who had brought clothes last night. She set the tray on the marble-topped coffee table, and there was coffee, a covered dish, and a small vase with a fresh white lily. My chest warmed at the gesture. Dante thought of details like flowers with breakfast. "Is there anything else you need, miss?" I shook my head, eyeing the tray. "This is wonderful. Thank you, Lydia." She nodded and departed quietly. I sat on the sofa and lifted the silver lid on the dish. A perfectly fluffy omelet studded with herbs, accompanied by toast and sliced fruit. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since a few nibbles of nervously skipped dinner the night before my wedding. I was halfway through the omelet when I heard Dante's footsteps approach. I glanced up as he entered the living area. He'd traded yesterday's suit for a more casual ensemble, dark trousers and a charcoal sweater that hugged his form. The sight made my heart flutter. He looked effortlessly handsome, the softer clothes somehow emphasizing the strength of his build. His hair was still slightly damp from a recent shower, and he'd trimmed the faint stubble along his jaw. "Good morning," he greeted, voice warm. "I hope you slept well." I swallowed the bite of toast in my mouth and managed a smile, like a rock. "I haven't slept that hard in, I can't remember how long." "Good," he said, and the simple word carried a wealth of satisfaction. He came closer, and I noticed he held a folded newspaper under one arm. My stomach clenched, guessing what news might be printed there. Dante noticed my gaze, and his mouth twitched in a wry smile. He set the paper down on the far end of the table, face down. "Perhaps not during breakfast," he said. "It's mostly nonsense anyway." I appreciated the gesture of shielding me from whatever lurid coverage was inside those pages. "It's fine. I'll brace myself for it eventually." He poured himself a cup of coffee from the carafe on my tray, motioning in askance. At my nod, he refilled my cup as well. The domesticity of it, sitting here in sunshine, sharing coffee with this man who was a virtual stranger a day ago, was both surreal and oddly comfortable. As I savored a sip, I realized Dante was watching me intently. I lowered my mug self-consciously. "What is it? Do I have bedhead or something?" I patted my hair, which I'd hastily finger-combed. A faint smile curved his lips. "You look lovely," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" I flushed at the compliment, busying myself with spearing a strawberry. "Sore, a bit, overwhelmed, but better, I think." I hesitated, then added earnestly, "Thanks to you." He reached across the space between us and briefly touched my hand, a reassuring squeeze. "You don't owe me thanks, Elena. I'm just glad you're here." His fingers lingered for a second longer than strictly necessary before he withdrew. The ghost of that touch buzzed pleasantly along my skin. "So," I said, clearing my throat to cover the sudden flutter in my stomach. "What happens now?" It was the question I'd been avoiding, but I needed to confront it. My life was a blank canvas at the moment. No plans, no home besides this refuge Dante offered. In the harsh light of day, the weight of uncertainty pressed on me. Dante leaned back, considering. "That depends on you. You're safe here for as long as you want. There's no rush for you to do anything until you're ready." "And my father? Rick?" I forced myself to ask. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter on my tongue. "They won't just let it go." He inclined his head. "No, they won't. Your father, from what I gather, is a prideful man. He'll be angry, but I suspect his primary concern is optics and the business deal. Caldwell, on the other hand." Dante's expression cooled. "He strikes me as someone who doesn't handle humiliation well." A humorless laugh escaped me. "That's an understatement. He's probably furious enough to—" I bit off the words, not wanting to voice the possibilities. Rick could very well lash out, possibly try to drag my name through the mud publicly, or worse, attempt to retaliate against Dante. The thought made me uneasy. I hated that I might bring trouble to Dante's doorstep. "Hey." Dante leaned forward, catching my downcast gaze. "Stop. Whatever you're thinking, don't. None of this is your fault. Rick Caldwell made his choices. If he chooses to make more poor decisions, that's on him. Understand?" I looked into those earnest blue eyes and managed a nod. "It's just, I don't want anyone else hurt because of me, including you." His jaw tightened. "I can handle Rick Caldwell." There was quiet steel in the statement, a confidence that was both reassuring and a bit frightening. "But let me worry about that, okay?" I wasn't sure I could simply turn off my worry, but I nodded again, letting the warmth in his gaze soothe me. Changing the subject slightly, I mustered a lighter tone. "You mentioned nonsense in the papers. I guess the story's out?" He grimaced. "The basics, yes. They know you left the wedding. Some outlets are spinning it as cold feet socialite fleas. Others hint at more salacious things. There's speculation about an affair, even your mental health. It's ridiculous." His eyes flashed with protective anger on my behalf. I sighed, both relieved and irritated. "At least they don't know about you. That you were involved." His expression grew guarded. "A couple mentions, unfortunately. Witnesses saw some of what happened outside the hotel and at the crash. A mystery man who intervened. There's a blurry photo someone took with a phone of us in the street, just after the accident." My eyes widened. "Seriously?" I hadn't even registered bystanders in those frantic moments. I cringed, imagining how it looked. A bride crawling on the ground and a tall stranger helping her. The romantic angle practically wrote itself, true or not. Dante nodded. "It's not clear enough to identify either of us definitively, but a few more clued-in sources have speculated it was me." He shrugged one shoulder. "I have a reputation in this city. It's not too far-fetched for gossip columns to link a dramatic rescue to my name." I absorbed that. "Are you worried?" "I mean, about the attention?" He gave a faint, dismissive smile. "It will pass. Scandals always do once something new comes along, and I've weathered worse public scrutiny." I recalled what I knew of him. Rumored criminal ties, whispered stories of retribution and power plays. Yes, I supposed he had. A day ago, the idea of being anywhere near someone like him would have terrified me. Now, sitting here basking in his kindness, I felt no fear at all, at least not of him. The fear that lingered was of how much I'd already come to rely on him for my sense of safety. That was a new kind of vulnerability. We finished breakfast, and Dante insisted I relax, gently overriding my half-formed offer to help clear the dishes. "Lydia will handle it," he said with the amused quirk of his lips, steering me away from the tray. "Besides, I believe you haven't seen the terrace yet." He guided me to a set of glass doors off the living room that I hadn't noticed before, hidden behind sheer curtains. Opening one, he revealed a large rooftop terrace. Potted jasmine and rose plants lined the edges, filling the air with a sweet, fresh fragrance. There was a seating area with plush outdoor sofas and a low table, as well as a stone railing that overlooked the city. My eyes widened in delight. "This is beautiful." I stepped out into the crisp air. We must have been at least 30 or 40 stories up. "I can't believe I missed this last night." "You had a lot on your mind," Dante said softly. joining me at the railing. He rested his forearms on it, gazing out over the skyline. I often come out here to think. We stood in companionable silence for a minute. Below, the city bustled, oblivious to the two of us standing above its thrumming heart. I took a deep breath, letting the cool breeze clear some cobwebs of tension from my mind. "I can see why you like it," I murmured. "It's peaceful up here. And the flowers, did you plant these?" A faint pink touched his cheeks. An unexpected boyishness in a man so otherwise composed. No. That's Lydia's doing. She threatens me if I don't water them properly, though." I laughed softly at that image. Dante Antonini, feared kingpin, being scolded over rose bushes by his housekeeper. "Well, give her my compliments. They're lovely." We wandered the terrace slowly. I found myself drawn to a cluster of pale pink roses, new blooms unfurling. Absent-mindedly, I reached to caress one velvet petal. My mother had loved roses. She maintained a small garden in our Hamptons home once upon a time. The memory stole my breath for a second. I wondered what she would think of all this, of the man standing beside me. "You're miles away," Dante observed gently. I blinked and turned to him. He had his hands in his pockets, watching me carefully as if assessing my mood. Those penetrating eyes saw too much. "I was thinking about my mom," I admitted. "She grew roses. She passed when I was 16. "I'm sorry." His voice was soft, genuine. "You two were close?" "Very. She was everything good. After she died, it was just me and Dad. He threw himself into work and grooming me to fit into his world." I gave a small, bitter smile. My engagement to Rick was as much about pleasing him as anything else, an alliance between two families sealed by a marriage. Dante's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, letting me continue. The words spilled easier than I expected. Maybe I needed to say them. I convinced myself it was my duty, that love was secondary to the security and success this marriage would bring. But as the day got closer, I realized I was about to trap myself in a life that would suffocate me. Rick's temper, my father's expectations. I felt like I couldn't breathe. A breeze lifted a strand of my hair, and I tucked it behind my ear. I wish my mom had been around. She'd have told me to follow my heart. She was that kind of person. Brave, kind. I swallowed a lump in my throat. "Sorry, I'm rambling." "No," Dante said firmly. "Thank you for telling me. Your mother sounds like she was a wonderful woman." "She was." I smiled, blinking away the sting in my eyes. I looked at Dante. "What about you? What were your parents like?" It was a bold question, perhaps, but after I'd opened up, it felt natural to ask in return. Dante's gaze drifted for a moment, focusing on some distant memory. "My father died when I was a boy," he said slowly. "He was not a good man. Not to my mother or to me. Most of what I do remember about him, I'd rather forget." Sadness pulled at my heart. I laid a hand on the railing near his. "And your mother?" His lips curved gently. "She was strong. Stronger than anyone gave her credit for. After my father was gone, she raised me and my younger sister on her own. Worked herself to the bone to keep us fed, keep a roof over our heads. We didn't have much, but she taught me values, loyalty, standing up for those who depend on you." He fell silent, and I sensed deep currents beneath those words. Perhaps why he took on the role he did, as a protector, a leader. "She sounds incredible," I murmured. "She was." Dante's throat bobbed, and he released a slow breath. "She died a few years ago. The neighborhood we lived in. It wasn't safe. One night, she was coming home from a late shift and got caught in the crossfire of someone else's feud." His tone was calm, but I could hear the tightly leashed anger beneath. "I wasn't there in time to protect her." "Oh, Dante," I whispered, my eyes filling anew. Without thinking, I reached and covered his hand with mine. His fist had clenched on the railing. At my touch, it relaxed slightly. He turned his palm up, intertwining his fingers with mine. The gesture was so natural, yet intimate. "That's part of why I can't stand men like Caldwell," he said quietly. "Men who think they own everything and everyone around them, who create collateral damage with their selfishness." He looked down at our joined hands. "I swore after my mother's death that I would never be powerless to protect those I care about again." My heart did a strange flip. Those I care about. Did I fall into that category already for him? The way he held my hand, The way his thumb unconsciously stroked my knuckles sent warm tingles up my arm. I realized with a sudden clarity that this dangerous, complicated man had in a matter of hours become someone I trusted deeply. And more than trust, I cared about him too, in a way I couldn't yet fully define. We lingered there, a charged hush between us. I wanted to say something meaningful, to thank him again, or to tell him how sorry I was for his pain. But the words knotted in my throat. In the end, it was Dante who broke the silence with a rueful chuckle, releasing my hand gently. "Listen to me, going dour on such a nice morning." "No," I asked. I protested softly, missing his warmth immediately. He offered a faint smile and tapped the newspaper still lying on the table inside. "Perhaps we should get the worst of this over with." I followed him back inside and, fortified by coffee and empathy, we sat and skimmed the day's coverage. Some of it made me wince. Some made me laugh in disbelief at the outright fabrications. Dante mostly looked irritated on my behalf, especially at an insinuation that I'd run off with a secret lover. The article coyly questioning Dante's identity. By the time we finished, I was emotionally exhausted again. Dante reached over and flipped the paper shut decisively. "Enough of that. They can speculate all they want. The only things that matter are what you want from here onward." From here onward. The phrase felt like the edge of a precipice. I set the paper aside and mustered a hopeful smile. One step at a time, I guess. I'll need to figure out work, living arrangements. But maybe I can take a few days before I worry about all that. "You can take as long as you need," he assured. "Money is not an issue. If you need help until you're on your feet." I shook my head immediately. I have some savings of my own. My mother left me a little, separate from my father. I'll be okay, and I had a job, actually. Well, sort of. I realized he might be surprised by that, assuming I was just a socialite. I did some freelance marketing work for charities. It wasn't full-time, but I liked it. A flicker of admiration crossed his face. "I'm sure you were good at it." I blushed. It was nothing huge, but maybe I can spin it into something bigger now that I don't have other obligations. Like being an ornamental wife. The thought tasted bitter and freeing all at once. He seemed about to respond when a knock sounded at the door. Enzo's voice came through. "Boss, it's Marco. He says it's urgent." Dante's demeanor shifted in a heartbeat, the relaxed, almost gentle man of the morning replaced by the cool, focused leader. He shot me an apologetic look as he stood. "Give me a moment." He moved to the door and cracked it, speaking low with Enzo. I caught a few words. "Meeting? Reschedule. Tell him 15 minutes. Closing the door, Dante turned to me with an annoyed sigh. "I'm sorry, I have something to deal with. I'll try not to be long." "It's okay," I said quickly, standing as well. "I don't want to keep you from your work. I'll be fine here." His gaze softened. "If you need anything." "Enzo's right outside, I know." I finished with a small grin. "And Lydia's around. Go, do your thing. I might even nap again or find a book to read." He hesitated, then nodded. "There's a library down the hall. Help yourself to anything, or the TV, or..." He caught himself and chuckled. "Listen to me worrying. I'll be back soon." With that, Dante headed to his home office, leaving me alone in the sun-dappled living room with a strange warmth blooming in my chest. He had opened up to me, shared pieces of his past. And I had opened up to him. More than I ever expected to. The trust between us was growing, fragile yet precious. As I wandered to a built-in bookshelf, scanning the titles absent-mindedly, I realized I hadn't thought about Rick or my father for a solid hour. My mind had been entirely on Dante, on wanting to know him and let him know me. The realization was startling, but not unwelcome. A small bud of happiness, even, peeked through the cracks of my recent trauma. I selected a novel at random and curled up in an armchair, but my thoughts kept drifting, replaying Dante's laugh on the terrace, the way his eyes softened when he spoke to me, the feel of his hand holding mine. A blush crept to my cheeks as I wondered what might have happened if we hadn't been interrupted, if maybe he had felt that same magnetic pull that I did. "Don't get carried away," I chided myself, though my heart beat a touch faster. It was too soon, too crazy to even think of romance. My life was still smoldering in ruins down there on the street like the burnt rubber from yesterday's chase. The last thing I needed was to catch feelings for a man who, by all accounts, lived in a world even more dangerous than the one I'd left. Yet, the thought of leaving him, of walking out of this penthouse and never seeing Dante again, made my chest ache. I pressed a hand there, sighing. One step at a time. I would allow myself at least a few days of safety and friendship here. The future could wait until tomorrow. I must have dozed off while pretending to read, because I startled awake to the sound of raised voices. Blinking, I realized at least an hour had passed. The sun's position had shifted. The voices were coming from somewhere below. The street? No. They were within the building, perhaps drifting up from the elevator or a lower floor through an open terrace door. I stood and stretched, wandering toward the hallway that led to Dante's office. As I neared, I recognized one of the voices as Dante's, though I'd never heard it with such an edge before. The words were muffled, but his tone was cold fury. Another man responded in an accented bark. I could only catch bits. My territory, unacceptable. If you touch... Enzo suddenly appeared at the end of the hall, and I jumped. I hadn't heard the elevator or front door, so he must have been at his post by the entrance. He gave me a reassuring nod. All is well, miss. Just business. Before I could ask, the office door slammed open. A burly man in a suit stormed out, face flushed red beneath a thick gray mustache. He muttered something in Italian that sounded crude as he brushed past me without a glance, and headed straight for the elevator. I pressed back against the wall to avoid him. He stabbed the elevator button, swearing under his breath, then disappeared behind its doors with a ding. My heart hammered at the sudden commotion. I looked toward Dante's office in alarm, and he stepped into the hallway, rubbing his temples. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Elena, I'm sorry. Did that wake you?" He strode over, concern etched on his features. "Not exactly. I was reading. I think I dozed a little." I peered past him toward the office. "Is everything okay? Who was that?" He grimaced and gently guided me away from the office doorway. "It's nothing you need to worry about. A business associate who needed some sense talked into him." I looked up at Dante, noting the residual anger tightening the corners of his mouth. "Sounded more like shouting than talking," I ventured. His expression cooled, but not towards me. I sensed he was still irritated with the man who'd left. "Sometimes that's the only language certain people understand." I frowned, remembering the bits I overheard. "He said something about territory. Dante, did it have anything to do with me? Be honest." He hesitated just a beat too long. I drew a sharp breath. "It did, didn't it? Is someone angry that I'm here? A spike of guilt and fear twisted together. Am I causing trouble for you with your, associates?" My lips parted. "Move against me? Why would anyone, aside from Rick or my father, which that man clearly was not, why would anyone else target me?" He sighed, drawing me into the living room. We sat on the sofa, and he kept one arm along the back behind me, a subtly protective stance that made me feel guarded. This city has layers most people don't see. Let's just say my business isn't without rivalry. When Caldwell's men made a scene pursuing you and I got involved, certain parties took notice. They think perhaps I've acquired a weak spot. "Me," I whispered, stomach clenching. He inclined his head gravely. "It's possible someone might try to leverage you to get to me. That was why I was hesitant when the police came. I didn't want publicity around you being here. I've done my best to keep things under wraps. But in my world, information has a way of seeping through cracks." I suddenly felt cold despite the sunshine. I pulled my legs up, wrapping my arms around them. "I'm so sorry," I said, voice small. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. I never wanted to bring trouble to your door, Dante. Maybe I should..." "Don't," he interrupted firmly. He reached over and took one of my hands, prying it gently from where I was hugging my knees. "Don't even say it. You running off now, alone, would be the worst possible idea. My enemies would find you easily, and I shudder to think what Caldwell might do if he got hold of you either." His hand tightened on mine. "No. You stay, and I ensure no harm comes to you." "Understood." His tone had gone full Mafia boss, authoritative, unyielding. It should have scared me, but it only conveyed the depth of his determination to keep me safe. My throat thickened at the earnest ferocity in his eyes. "Understood," I murmured, squeezing his hand. He relaxed marginally. "Good. I have men doubling security around the building. No one gets close without my knowing." I managed a shaky smile. "Does this mean I'm a hostage now?" I attempted to tease, but it came out weak. His face clouded, and for a heartbeat I worried I'd offended him. But then he surprised me by bringing my captured hand to his lips. He pressed a soft kiss to my knuckles that sent a hot flutter straight through me. "You are free to leave whenever you wish, Elena," he said against my skin, voice low. He looked up. eyes blazing sincerity. "I hope you choose to stay, but I won't keep you against your will. Not now. Not ever. Please believe that." My breath caught. The contrast between his fierce declaration and the tender brush of his lips on my hand had my heart somersaulting. "I do," I said quietly. "I believe you." And I did. Dante might be accustomed to command, but he'd given me every opportunity to decide for myself. Even just now, he'd asked for my understanding, not blind obedience. We sat like that for a moment, something electric building in the air between us. His thumb caressed the back of my hand slowly, and I realized I was leaning closer, drawn in by the gravitational pull of him. His gaze flicked to my lips and back, and I felt my own part in a silent invitation. A loud buzz from the door intercom broke the spell. We both startled slightly. Dante exhaled, muttering an apology as he released my hand and stood. "Yes," he answered through a wall-mounted panel. "Delivery for Miss Davenport," crackled a voice. From a boutique, my brow furrowed. A delivery? For me? Dante looked equally puzzled for an instant. Then something dawned on him. He glanced to me. "Were you expecting anything from your home? Or maybe one of your friends sent something?" I shook my head. But then an inkling hit. My dress. Yesterday at the church, I'd had a small overnight bag with a change of clothes for after the reception, which I left behind in the bridal suite. Perhaps someone had been kind enough to send it. I did have a bag at the hotel. Maybe my friend Rachel had it sent here. I told her I was safe but didn't give details, though. Dante nodded slowly and pressed the intercom. "Send it up." Enzo met the courier at the penthouse door while Dante and I waited a few steps back. When Enzo returned, he carried a large flat box tied with satin ribbon. He set it on the table. The courier was already gone. I approached the box, heart picking up. It was too nicely packaged to be my overnight bag. With a questioning glance at Dante, I tugged the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the most exquisite champagne-colored evening gown I'd ever seen. Beaded lace, delicate off-shoulder straps, a flowing chiffon skirt. It was beautiful, and completely unfamiliar. Atop it was a card. I plucked it up and immediately recognized the bold, scrawling handwriting. My blood turned to ice. "What is it?" Dante asked sharply, noticing my reaction. I wordlessly handed him the card, my hand trembling. He read it, jaw clenching. "Elena, since you didn't get to wear the last dress I gave you for a wedding, here's another for a funeral." Antonini's specifically. My breakfast lurched in my stomach. The implication was clear. Rick intended to kill Dante, and me to wear this dress to mourn. It was a threat, wrapped up in pretty paper and vile intent. Dante crushed the card in his fist, fury radiating off him. "That bastard," he growled. I sank onto the sofa, suddenly dizzy. "He has my address. This address. How?" My voice wavered. We had been so careful to keep me hidden. How had Rick found out I was with Dante? Much less where. Dante paced like a caged panther. "It has to be someone in the building or my organization leaking information. Or perhaps a guess. He knows I own this building." He stopped and faced Enzo. "Get Marco on this. I want to know who handled that delivery from start to finish. And double our watch on Caldwell's known associates." Enzo nodded grimly and retreated to make calls. I stood, wrapping my arms around myself. Fear for Dante overshadowed my own terror. "He's unhinged," I whispered. "Truly insane. Dante, what are we going to do?" He gently grasped my shoulders and held me back so he could look into my eyes. His own were like blue fire. "We're going to stop him," he said simply. "He's coming for me regardless. I'll be ready. He wants a war. He'll get one." A sliver of dread coiled in my stomach. "But if he has people helping him..." Dante's expression was resolute. "I have people too. Loyal people. I kept things contained earlier, hoping to avoid this very scenario. But Rick has forced my hand." He drew a thumb tenderly across my cheek. "I need you to trust me now." I nodded without hesitation. I trusted him with my life, but I also didn't want him risking his on my account. Panic swelled at the prospect of something happening to him. "Just promise me you'll be careful," I whispered. He smiled, a fierce, protective smile. "I plan on living a very long time, especially now that I have something to live for." The way he said it left no doubt what, or who, that something was. My breath caught. Before I could respond, he pressed a firm, swift kiss to my lips. "Stay with Enzo and Lydia. I have to make some arrangements. I'll come find you soon." I watched him stride out, barking orders to Enzo in a low voice. My heart was in my throat. The world I'd fallen into was erupting in conflict, and all I could do was cling to the faith I had in one man to see us through. Clutching the delicate fabric of that hateful dress, I slowly sank to the floor. With tearful determination, I began ripping the gown to shreds. Piece by piece, bead by bead, I destroyed Richard Caldwell's cruel gift and all the fear it carried. When I finally stopped, chest heaving, the dress lay in tatters around me. I wasn't that terrified girl he tried to break anymore. I would face whatever came next by Dante's side, come hell or high water. And I silently vowed that Richard Caldwell would never touch me, or anyone else, ever again. The hours that followed were a blur of tense preparation. Dante mobilized his resources with surgical precision. Armed men in suits came and went from the penthouse, receiving orders, reporting on intel. I caught snatches of conversation as I hovered anxiously on the sidelines, locations being scouted, names of known associates of Rick being tossed around, surveillance feeds checked. Dante remained in control at the center of it all, a general orchestrating his forces. Gone was the gentle confidant from the terrace. He had donned the mantle of a Mafia don fully now, yet every so often, amid barking directives, he would seek me out with his eyes, in offering a small reassuring nod or squeeze of my hand in passing. It was the only thing that kept my panic at bay. As dusk fell, Dante pulled me aside to the quiet of his bedroom, away from prying eyes. On the bed lay a bulletproof vest in my size, apparently procured by someone on his team. I stared at it, a cold weight settling in my stomach. "I need you to wear this," he said, his tone brooking no argument. My mouth went dry. Are we going somewhere?" He hesitated. "Intel suggests Caldwell and his hired friends are holed up at a warehouse by the docks. I'm going to pay them a visit tonight." Ice sluiced through my veins. Tonight, it was happening. My knees felt weak. "Then why do I need, in case anything happens here while I'm gone?" He interjected gently. "I don't expect it. They'll be occupied with me, but I won't take chances." I realized he meant to leave me behind, and a flood of both relief and fear washed over me. I didn't want to be a hostage to be used against him in a fight, but the thought of him going into danger without me there made me almost equally ill. Sensing my turmoil, Dante placed his hands on my shoulders. "Enzo and a full team will guard this building. You'll be safe here." "What about you?" I whispered, voice trembling despite my efforts. I clutched the front of his shirt. "I don't want you walking into a trap." His eyes softened. "It likely is a trap, but not the one they think. They expect to catch me off guard, perhaps alone. They underestimate my preparedness." He brushed a knuckle under my chin. "This ends tonight, Elena, one way or another." Tears pricked my eyes. "Please be careful." It was all I could choke out. He pulled me into a fierce embrace. I buried my face in the crook of his neck, breathing him in. Sandalwood and resolve. He pressed a hard, slow kiss to my temple. "I have too much to live for to do anything but win," he murmured. We held each other until Enzo knocked on the open door, clearing his throat. "Boss, it's time." Dante pulled back, and with painstaking care, helped me into the slim-fitting vest. His fingers lingered on the straps as he adjusted it over my sweater. "Keep this on until I return, promise me." "I promise." My voice shook. Satisfied, he nodded. Then with one final kiss, a brief, soul-searing press of his lips to mine, he turned and left the room. I followed as far as the hallway, where two of Dante's men gently intercepted me, making it clear I was to stay put beyond that point. Dante glanced back at me before stepping into the elevator with Enzo and 4 other men, each armed. He gave me a reassuring half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then the elevator doors slid shut, and he was gone. The next hour was pure agony. Lydia sat with me, holding my hand as I restlessly paced the living room. 2 guards remained posted by the entry. The television was tuned to a local news station, but my attention was fractured, ears straining for any word. I expected perhaps to hear distant sirens or an explosion, something cinematic, but the city around me gave no sign of the confrontation underway. When my nerves couldn't take it, I sank to the sofa and bowed my head, silently praying to any power that be to keep Dante safe and bring him back to me. Lydia murmured comforting words I barely processed. My mind conjured worst-case scenarios on a loop. A sudden sharp crackle came from the coffee table, jolting me. One of the guards had set a 2-way radio there before Dante left. I realized it was Enzo's voice coming through, tinny but clear. "Secure. Repeat. Package secure." Package? My heart leapt. Did that mean Rick or Dante? Another voice responded on the radio. Marco, I thought. Copy that. Any casualties? Minor on our side. 6 hostiles down or incapacitated. Antonini is clear. I nearly collapsed in relief. Dante was okay. They'd done it. The guard by the radio quickly silenced the volume as a precaution, but I'd heard enough. Tears of joy sprung to my eyes and I covered my mouth with a shaky hand. Lydia squeezed my shoulder, smiling. He's all right, dear, she soothed. I nodded, exhaling a ragged breath. He was all right. They'd won. The nightmare would soon be over. I stood, adrenaline still surging. I need to be downstairs when they come in, I said, suddenly desperate to see Dante with my own eyes. The guards exchanged looks. Mr. Antonini instructed you stay here, one began. I know, I said quickly, grabbing a sweatshirt from the coat rack to throw over the vest. I'll stay inside the building, I promise. But I need to see him as soon as he arrives. Please. I gave them what I hoped was a convincingly steady look. Perhaps it was the glow of victory in the air, but they relented. One escorted me down to the lobby in a private service elevator, while the other remained upstairs. In the lobby, a few armed men I recognized from earlier stood at attention. Through the glass front doors, I saw 3 black SUVs pull up in the circular drive out front. My heart pounded as I watched figures emerge. Dante was at the head of them, striding inside with purpose. Enzo and the others flanked 2 prisoners whose hands were secured behind their backs with zip ties. One was Rick, disheveled, a bruise blooming on his temple and fury twisting his features. The other was a gaunt man with Slavic features, likely one of the friends Rick had recruited. Both were shoved forward by Dante's men, likely to be taken somewhere for, well, I didn't care what became of them right now. My entire being was focused on Dante. I rushed across the polished marble floor. Dante! His head snapped up at my voice. The hard cast of his face melted into palpable relief. He closed the distance in a few long strides. I threw myself against him, unmindful of the audience. His arms wrapped around me, crushing me to his chest. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I just clung to him, tears of relief soaking into his shoulder. I felt his lips press to my hair and temple in frantic succession, as if needing to physically reaffirm I was real and safe. Elena, he whispered, the single word carrying a world of emotion. I leaned back just enough to drink him in. Aside from a few cuts on his cheek and a tear in his sleeve, he looked unscathed. The tension he wore into battle was easing, his eyes warm on mine. You're okay, I breathed, smiling through my tears. I am now, he murmured, cupping my face with one hand. He seemed about to kiss me, but a harsh scoff from a few yards away interrupted. Well, isn't this a hallmark moment? Rick spat, glaring at us. 2 guards held him firmly, but his lip curled in disgust. Should have figured you'd be down here panting for him, Elena. Always had a thing for strays, didn't you? Dante tensed to lunge, but I grabbed his jacket, stepping forward myself. Enough. I was done being afraid of Richard Caldwell. I faced him head on. Shut up, Rick, I said, my voice surprisingly clear and strong. You lost. It's over. His eyes flicked to the shredded vest visible under my unzipped sweatshirt, and a nasty sneer split his face. Look at you, playing dress-up in a bulletproof vest, like you're one of his little gang now. This what you wanted? Huh? To be the Mafia's whore instead of mine? My cheeks burned. But I refused to be baited by his cruelty. Before I could retort, Dante moved to my side. His hand found the small of my back, steadying, but also claiming. When he spoke, his voice dripped lethal calm. Mind your tongue, Caldwell, or I'll remove it. Rick barked a laugh. Why should I? You're going to kill me anyway, aren't you? Big man, Antonini. Couldn't fight me one-on-one, so you ambushed us. He jutted his chin at the gaunt man next to him. Took out half of Petrov's crew. You're a dead man walking, you realize. There'll be retaliation. The other prisoner, Petrov, presumably, said something rapid and angry in Russian to Rick that I didn't catch. He looked just as murderous as Rick, but Dante's men swiftly separated them a few extra paces. Dante just smiled coldly. There won't be retaliation. Petrov and I have already come to an understanding. He glanced at the Russian, whose furious expression faltered slightly. Dante's men must have made quick work of demoralizing their hired guns. As for you, Rick, I gave you every opportunity to walk away and you kept pushing. Rick snarled, lunging uselessly against the guards. You think you can just steal my fiancé and get away with it? This isn't the end, Antonini. I have powerful family friends. They'll what? I cut in sharply. Try to avenge your pathetic ego? Newsflash, Rick. Your friends didn't show up to help you today, did they? Because nobody likes a loser, and that's what you are. My voice shook with pent-up disdain. You lost me. You lost everything. His face purpled, twisted with hate I knew would never fade so long as he drew breath. "You stupid bitch," he seethed. "You think you'll be safe with him? He's a monster. Once he's bored of you, you'll end up in a shallow grave or trafficked to the highest bidder. That's the world you chose." I flinched, but Dante's hand rubbed soothing circles on my back. "Don't listen," he murmured. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Enzo hand Dante his gun. Grip first. Dante took it, his gaze never leaving Rick. The weight of the moment shifted. Dante stepped forward, gently moving me behind him. The lobby was silent except for Rick's ragged breathing. Dante raised the pistol, aiming it level at Rick's forehead. A chill swept through me. This was it. He was going to execute Rick right here. Part of me wanted nothing more than to see that vile man gone for good, and yet I found my hand clutching at Dante's sleeve. He glanced at me sidelong. His eyes were ice, but at my touch they warmed just a fraction, seeking my permission or my desire, mercy or vengeance. He'd let me sway this one way or the other. My mind flashed through everything Rick had done and threatened to do. He would never stop coming after us if alive. He'd call on any resource, hurt anyone to get what he wanted, to satisfy his twisted pride. I knew that as surely as I knew my own name. I swallowed hard and gave Dante a barely perceptible nod. Resolve settled over his features. Rick noticed. His eyes darted from me to Dante and back, registering that silent exchange. For the first time, a flicker of true fear crossed his face. "No, wait," he started, but Dante's voice cut like a blade. "Richard Caldwell, you threatened the woman I love." The word sent a jolt through me, even as it pronounced Rick's death sentence. Dante's finger tightened on the trigger. "This is for her." Rick opened his mouth, perhaps to curse me one last time, but he never got the chance. The gunshot was deafening in the marble lobby. I jumped, instinctively squeezing my eyes shut. When I opened them, Rick was slumped in his captor's arms, a neat crimson hole in his forehead. They let his body drop unceremoniously to the floor. A collective exhale seemed to release in the aftermath. The men with Petrov looked away, muttering under their breaths. Petrov himself looked grim but unsurprised. My own hands trembled, adrenaline and shock coursing through me. Rick was gone. Just like that. I didn't feel joy or sorrow, just a strange hollow relief, like a tumor had finally been excised. Dante handed his pistol back to Enzo, his face unreadable. Then he turned to me and gently reached to cup my cheek. "Are you all right?" I covered his hand with mine, leaning into his palm. "I will be," I answered truthfully. And with Rick gone, I believed it more than ever. Dante drew me into his side as his men efficiently cleared up the scene. They moved Rick's body discreetly out of sight and escorted Petrov and his surviving crew off the premises, presumably to be dealt with elsewhere. Dante whispered orders that I didn't bother to listen to. I was too focused on the steady beat of his heart under my arm and the lingering echo of what he'd said in front of everyone. The woman I love. Before I could even process that fully, Dante was steering me gently back toward the elevator. "It's done," he murmured as the doors closed us in blessed privacy. His shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of violence and responsibility draining now that it was just us. I looked up at him, the man who had crashed into my life like fate itself, my guardian devil, my dark knight. He had been ruthless when necessary, yet the way he gazed at me now was so tender it made my heart ache. "You okay?" he asked again softly, brushing a thumb over my lower lip. I realized I was trembling and attempted a smile. "I'm okay, just processing." My eyes searched his, finding equal parts concern and adoration there. You said you loved me." My voice was barely above a whisper. He let out a faint, almost self-conscious laugh. "That I did." A crease of worry formed between his brows. "I'm sorry if it was too soon or if—" I answered by pulling him down into a kiss. He responded instantly, wrapping me in his arms as the elevator ascended. This kiss tasted of freedom, of a future stolen back from fear. When we broke apart, I pressed my forehead to his and smiled in earnest. "I love you too, Dante." The relief and joy that lit his face were beyond anything I'd ever seen. He crushed me to him in another embrace, letting out a breath like he'd been holding it forever. I realized in that moment how vulnerable he'd felt too, risking his heart on me just as I had on him. We stayed entwined as the elevator delivered us to the penthouse. His jacket fell to the floor somewhere between the lift and the living room as we walked slowly, unwilling to let each other go. I ran my hands over his chest, feeling the rapid thud of his heart. He was alive. We were alive. And we were together. Nothing else mattered. Dante tilted my chin up, studying my face with reverence. "You are astonishing," he murmured. "Brave and beautiful and mine. Yes, I whispered, emotion thick in my throat. Yours. He kissed me again, deeply and without reservation, and I lost myself in it, knowing that this, here in Dante's arms, was where I was always meant to be. Months later, as winter's first snow fell outside the window, Elena found herself curled up in Dante's arms by a crackling fire. So much had changed in such a short time. She had learned the depth of her own courage and the boundlessness of Dante's love. Penny for your thoughts, Dante murmured, brushing a kiss against her hair. Elena smiled, tightening her arms around him. Just thinking how lucky I am, she whispered. He tilted her chin up to meet his tender gaze. In the dancing firelight, the wedding band on his finger glinted, the matching one on hers a warm weight that reminded her this was no dream. They had quietly married in a small ceremony, choosing forever without hesitation. I'm the lucky one, Dante said softly. He pressed a gentle kiss to her lips, his warmth chasing away any lingering chill from outside. Elena closed her eyes, heart full to bursting. In Dante she had found safety, passion, and a partnership stronger than anything she'd ever imagined. The frightened bride who had bolted in desperation was long gone. In her place was a woman deeply loved and unafraid of the future. Outside, snowflakes swirled, blanketing the world in fresh white. Elena drew back just enough to look into her husband's eyes. Thank you, she whispered, emotion thick in her throat. For what? Dante brushed a thumb over her cheek. For catching me when I ran, she said, voice quavering with happiness. For giving me the life I never dared dream of. His answering smile was as radiant as the firelight. Always, he vowed, I will always catch you, Elena. She leaned in and kissed him, slow and sweet, savoring the promise between them. Whatever storms they had weathered were behind them now. Together, they had found a love born from chaos and forged in trust, a love neither of them would ever let go.